This is a Note to Future Me, Monday, July 9th, 2018. Dynamic ad insertion. I've had some conversations with a couple of my clients about this opportunity. They were asking about it, had some confusion about it, and I thought, well, that's probably worthy of a podcast for myself as a Note to Future Me, as well as listeners to my podcast to kind of discuss the ins and outs and the pros and the cons of dynamic ad insertions. Not every podcast hosting platform offers this as of yet. About a handful do. What it does is allow your platform to place ads inside and outside of your podcast. It's not an automatic. You have to tell the platform that you're accepting ads and you want to be paid for those ads. You're not going to become rich, but it does offer an opportunity to make a little bit of money, as well as looking at it as a training for your listeners to know that start to expect some ads in or outside our podcast. The way to go about it is that you will let your hosting platform know that, yes, I'm interested. So you start going in the dashboard and allowing that platform to either do a pre-roll, a mid-roll, or a post-roll, and you're able to select the amount, the length of ads. It could be 15 seconds, 30 seconds, or 60 seconds, or could it be a combination of a couple of 15-second commercials or a couple of 30-second commercials, depending on what you're comfortable with, and possibly some suggestions from the platform in regards to their quote-unquote fill rate. That is the demand for that amount of time, as well as the type of podcast. The pre-roll is pretty well self-explanatory. Those ads will run prior to your podcast. Post-roll, again, self-explanatory. They'll run after the podcast. The tricky part is the mid-roll, and that takes some thought and process and thinking about, okay, if you're allowing the platform to insert an ad into your podcast, you're going to tell the platform at what point in time you are okay with each individual episode where you want that ad to be placed. So let's say it's at the 3-minute and 18-second mark in one episode. Another episode could be at the 4-minute and 30-second mark. But you need to format now your podcast to make it sound natural. And that being, it can't be an ad inserted when you take a breath. It has to be the natural flow of your podcast. And I've heard a couple of podcasters talking about how to approach this, and they've been really loose in regards to advising their listeners on how to do this, and the loosest and what's made my head kind of spin was just finish your thought and leave a pause, and that's where the ad would be inserted. I think what's going to happen is if you've ever heard a radio station come out of a music set and go right into a commercial set, it's going to sound just like that. It's kind of a slap in the face. There needs to be some segue between your final thought, finish your sentence, finish your thought, finish that little bit of an interview, whatever the case might be, but you can signify that end with a little bit of music, possibly a 5-second music segue. And then if the ad is not inserted, your next thought comes in right after the music segue. I think a great example of this is Seth Godin's Akimbo podcast. Take a listen to that podcast, and you're going to hear exactly what I'm thinking about and way I think could be the first step in formatting your podcast and allowing that dynamic ad insertion to happen that is not going to slap your listeners right in the head, that it's so abrupt that it's happening. It's listening to Seth Godin's Akimbo, Akimbo podcast is going to be a little bit abrupt for the first time you listen to it because of his quick music segues between thoughts, but think of it as opportunities that ads could be inserted at those points, and it makes sense. I'm not saying Seth's going to do that, but as an example of how to format your podcast to allow these dynamic ad insertions to happen, makes a lot of sense. Hey, be sure to sign up for my daily email newsletter, Open the Mic newsletter. go to my website, circle270media.com, and you can sign up. It's free. I go over topics like Sales 101 for podcasters, production toolbox, news, social media toolbox, as well as on Fridays, I spotlight podcasts that I suggest you should binge on over the weekend. Circle270media.com. Thanks for taking notes with me.